The man in the hallway. I arrived at my hotel late that evening, exhausted from a long trip. The lobby was eerily quiet, with only the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. But the longer I stood there, the more I noticed the lights weren't just buzzing. They were flickering, as if something unseen was moving past them, disrupting the current. And then, for a split second, a shadow darted across the far end of the lobby, just beyond my peripheral vision. It didn't move like a persona, it was too fast, too fluid, as if it was gliding rather than stepping. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head sharply, my pulse hammering, but there was nothing there. And yet, the air felt heavier, as if something unseen had just passed by, leaving a lingering, suffocating presence. I turned my head sharply, but there was nothing there. The receptionist barely looked up as she slid my keycard across the desk. Room 709. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I stepped into the elevator. The doors groaned shut, and the dim yellow lights inside flickered slightly. As the elevator ascended, I felt an odd sense of unease, like something heavy was settling in my chest. When the doors slid open, the hallway was empty, stretching unnaturally long in both directions. I stepped out, rolling my suitcase along the faded carpet, the wheels whispering against the fabric. The air was stale, as if the ventilation had stopped working years ago. Each door was identical, dull beige with peeling numbers. My room was at the very end of the corridor. As I passed room 705, I heard Ida's soft shuffling sound. I paused, glancing toward the door. The peephole was dark, the door slightly ajar. I frowned. Maybe housekeeping had forgotten to close it properly? But as I moved past, a slow, deliberate creak came from inside, like someone shifting their weight. I quickened my pace, reaching my door and fumbling with the keycard. Swipe. Red light. I cursed under my breath, swiping it again. Swipe. Red light. A sudden chill ran down my spine. The air in the hallway felt heavier. The carpet beneath my feet seemed damp, like it had absorbed something that shouldn't be there. The silence around me wasn't empty, it was watching. Then, as I took another step forward, I heard it. A breath, soft, ragged, just behind me. A chill slithered down my spine, the kind that made my skin prickle like I had just walked through a freezing mist. The air around me felt denser, heavier, as if something unseen had shifted. I spun around, my pulse hammering, but the hallway remained still and empty. Yet, the silence wasn't comforting, it was suffocating, pressing against my ears like a thick, invisible force. The carpet beneath my feet seemed damp, like it had absorbed something that shouldn't be there. The silence around me wasn't empty, it was watching. I turned my head slightly, peering over my shoulder. The door to room 705 had opened wider. Someone was standing there. A tall, thin figure loomed in the doorway, just a shadow against the dim hallway light. I couldn't make out a face, just the outline of someone watching me, motionless, silent. I forced my shaking hands to swipe the card again. Green light. I shoved the door open and nearly fell inside, slamming it shut behind me. My breath came in sharp gasps as I pressed my back against the cold wood. My hands fumbled for the deadbolt, twisting it into place with a loud click. Silence. I closed my eyes, willing my heartbeat to slow. It was just some random guest, I told myself. Maybe someone had left their door open by accident. Maybe. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I froze. The sound was too light, as if someone barely tapped their knuckles against the door. My skin prickled with goosebumps. I turned my head toward the peephole, hesitation clawing at my gut. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward and peered through the tiny glass circle. The hallway was empty. I let out a shaky breath, stepping back. Maybe I imagined it, maybe the exhaustion was getting to me. Then the knock came again, louder this time. But it wasn't just knocking, it was dragging, like nails scraping against the wood. And then came the whisper. Low, unintelligible. Right outside the door, I pressed my back against the cold wood, barely breathing, as the whispers twisted into something resembling a child's laughter, thin, hollow, and wrong. But it wasn't just knocking, it was dragging, like nails scraping against the wood. My breath hitched. I didn't move. My hands curled into fists, fingernails digging into my palms. Something wasn't right. Slowly, painfully, I leaned in again, pressing my eye to the peephole. This time, I wasn't alone. A face, stared back at me. But it wasn't a normal face. It was wrong. The features were blurred, as if smeared like wet paint. The eyes were just dark, sunken holes. The mouth stretched into something that almost resembled a smile, but not quite. It was too wide, too unnatural. I stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs. What the hell was that? The knocking didn't stop. It turned into pounding. I grabbed the hotel phone with shaking hands and dialed the front desk. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. The pounding on the door grew more violent, rattling the frame. I backed up toward the window, desperate for an escape. My fingers clawed at the curtains, yanking them open. And then I saw him. But it wasn't just him. There were others. Figures, barely distinguishable in the dim light of the parking lot, all facing upward, all staring at me. Their heads twitched unnaturally, as if they were trying to listen to something just out of reach. One of them lifted a hand and waved. Not in greeting, but in slow, deliberate recognition. My breath caught in my throat as an overwhelming sense of dread crept over me. The wave felt unnatural, too controlled, too knowing. My instincts screamed at me to turn away, but I couldn't. It was as if something beyond my control compelled me to keep watching, my muscles locked in place. The figure's head tilted, the motion jerky and unnatural, and though I couldn't see their eyes, I felt them boring into me, waiting for me to respond. But it wasn't just him. There were others. Figures, barely distinguishable in the dim light of the parking lot, all facing upward, all staring at me. Their heads twitched unnaturally, as if they were trying to listen to something just out of reach. The same figure, standing in the parking lot 7 floors below. Looking up at me, I turned back to the door, but the pounding had stopped. Silence. For a long moment, I didn't move. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Then, cautiously, I crept forward and checked the peephole once more. The hallway was empty again. But something had changed. The door to room 705 was wide open. I never slept that night. At some point, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. "You saw me." I didn't open it. But then, my phone screen flickered on its own. The same message repeated over and over, each time the text becoming more distorted, the letters stretching unnaturally. I turned the phone off, but the screen stayed on. A faint, flickering reflection appeared in the blackness of face, watching me from inside the glass. My breath caught. The screen distorted for a split second, the text glitching into unreadable symbols before returning to normal. And then, just as I reached for the phone, another notification popped up. "Don't look away." When I went to check out in the morning, the receptionist frowned at me when I mentioned the room number. "Room 705?" she repeated. "That room has been empty for years.